Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
On the snowy evening of January 12, 1993, 17-year-old Hang Lee left her home in St. Paul, Minnesota, stepping into the cold with nothing but a light leather jacket, a Skid Row t-shirt, black pants, and tennis shoes. She was heading out for what she believed was a job interview, a potential opportunity to secure a better future for herself and her family. But before she left, she turned to her younger brother, Kwa, and said something chilling. "If I don't come back, please come looking for me. I don't trust Nikki." Hang never came home that night. She has never been seen again. Hang Lee was born on October 9, 1975, into a Hmong refugee family that had fled Laos. The Lees settled in St. Paul, a city with a significant Hmong population, but adjusting to life in America was far from easy. Hang, however, embraced both her cultural roots and her individuality. Fluent in both Hmong and English, she had big dreams. She wanted to be a writer, to tell the story of her people and their journey to America. She was a bookworm who loved romance novels, and despite the traditional expectations placed on her, she dared to be different. Hang was not your typical high school senior. She had a bold, 80s rocker look, complete with teased-out hair, red-dyed bangs, and a love for heavy metal music. While her appearance earned her the unfair reputation of being a bad kid in her community, those who knew her best saw a kind-hearted, hard-working girl who had been holding down a job since she was 13 to help support her family and save for college. She was one of 13 siblings, and money was always tight. Her future was set. She planned to attend the University of Minnesota that fall, but that future was stolen from her. On that fateful January evening, Hang received a phone call from her friend Nikki Lee, who offered her a job opportunity. Nikki worked for a man named Mark Stephen Wallace, who ran a paint and decorating business in town. Wallace, a 30-year-old ex-convict, had a disturbing past, though Hang didn't know it at the time. Nikki found it odd that Wallace wanted to hire someone new because, in the months she had worked there, she had never seen any actual customers. The only people who seemed to frequent his business were teenage boys, who would disappear with him behind a locked door. Something was off. Hang, eager for work, agreed to the interview. She called her boss at the Wong Cafe, where she worked, and told her she wouldn't be coming in that night. Then she left home between 6 and 7 p.m., asking her brother to lock the door behind her. That was the last time anyone in her family saw her. Wallace was no ordinary employer. He was a twice-convicted rapist with a history of preying on women. In 1987, he had been caught calling a woman, offering her a fake job interview. The woman grew suspicious and called the police, leading to his arrest. When officers searched him, they found shoelaces in his pocket. He had planned to tie the woman up. He later admitted to police that he had been calling women using stolen contact information, hoping to lure them into traps. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but was released early in 1991. By 1993, Wallace was back in St. Paul, running his so-called painting business and surrounding himself with vulnerable young people. Nikki later told police that the night Hang disappeared, Wallace picked them both up in a white pickup truck, but at some point, he switched to a tan or silver 1988 Chevrolet Cavalier. The three drove around while Wallace talked about taking them to a casino. When Nikki reminded him they had school the next day, he instead decided to drop her off first. The last time Nikki saw Hang, she was moving from the back seat into the front as Wallace drove away. She never came home. At 1 a.m., Kwa woke up and realized he hadn't heard his sister knocking to be let back inside. He rushed to the door, hoping he had just slept through it. But when he looked outside, he saw something eerie. Fresh snow blanketed the ground, untouched. There were no footprints leading to their home. By morning, Hang was still missing. Kwa immediately went to Nikki's school, found her in the cafeteria, and asked where his sister was. Nikki, seemingly indifferent, snapped, "I don't know where your sister is." A few days later, Hang's parents reported her missing. But police dismissed the case, labeling her a runaway. She had run away once before, but her family knew something was wrong. She left behind her purse, her extra clothes, and even her most recent paycheck, things she would have taken if she had left on her own. Still, the authorities refused to listen. For 6 months, the case sat cold. By June 1993, police finally started to take notice. Hang still hadn't come home. When officers re-interviewed Nikki, she changed her story. At first, she claimed Hang had left with unknown young men. But this time, she admitted Wallace was the last person seen with Hang. When asked why she had lied, she said Wallace had warned her not to talk about his business. Police finally searched Wallace's home, office, and vehicles. They performed forensic tests, but nothing concrete was found. Shortly after, Wallace lawyered up and refused to cooperate. The case faded into the background for over a decade. Then, in 2009, investigators received a tip about a detached garage Wallace had built unusually quickly in 2004 at his mother's old home. 2 out of 3 cadaver dogs alerted to a specific spot near the garage. Police wanted to excavate, but without enough evidence for a warrant, they were stuck. The new homeowners refused to allow them to dig. In 2016, Wallace was arrested again, this time for kidnapping and holding a woman hostage. During his arrest, he reportedly told the victim, "Do what I say, or I'll do what I did to that girl in St. Paul. She walked into my business and never walked out." He served just 3 years. In 2021, police revisited the garage site, this time using 3D ground-penetrating radar. The results were vague. Police said they didn't find sufficient evidence for an arrest, but they never clarified whether anything was actually found. In 2017, after 24 years, Hang's family held a spirit release ceremony, a Hmong tradition that allows a lost soul to move on. Her mother, Chong, has forgiven whoever took her daughter, but she still longs to bring Hang home for a proper burial. To this day, Hang Lee's case remains unsolved. The man suspected of her disappearance, Mark Stephen Wallace, remains confined in the Minnesota Sex Offender Program, not for her case, but for his history of violence against women. If you have any information about what happened to Hang Lee, please call the St. Paul Police Missing Persons Unit at 651-266-5612. Someone out there knows what happened. It's time for Hang to come home. The disappearance of Amy Pagnac is a heartbreaking case that has haunted her family and community for over 30 years, underscoring the enduring vigilance in the search for truth. Amy, a 13-year-old girl from Ohio, Minnesota, went missing on August 18, 1989, just 2 miles from her home, a detail that would raise many questions over the years. She was living with her mother, Susan Pagnac, and her stepfather, Marshall Mitten. The relationship with Marshall is a point of confusion, as sources often referred to him as her stepfather, but he is listed on Amy's birth certificate as her biological father, which complicates things further. Susan described Amy as a bright, cheerful young girl who was looking forward to starting the 8th grade. Amy was tall for her age, standing at about 5 feet 10 inches, but only weighed 100 pounds. With her brown hair and striking blue eyes, she stood out despite some unique scars on her body. Tragically, Amy dealt with seizures and headaches due to pressure on her brain, though she never received an official diagnosis. There were also indications that she might have been bipolar, adding to the emotional challenges she faced at such a young age. The day she vanished, Amy had spent hours working on the family farm near Statfield with Marshall, harvesting fruits and vegetables. Normally, her mother and younger sister would have joined in, but they had other plans that day. After finishing their work, they headed home to Maple Grove. Around 4:30 p.m., Marshall stopped at the Holiday gas station in Ohio, which was just 2 miles from their home. He claims that he went inside to use the restroom, leaving Amy in the car. However, when he returned, she was gone. Initially, he thought she might have gone into the restroom to wait for him, but when he checked, the restroom was occupied by someone else, and Amy was nowhere to be found. He searched the area for about 10 minutes, but no one had seen her leave the car. The beginning of this mystery marked the start of an ongoing investigation filled with questions and suspicions. Marshall called his wife, Susan, and immediately became more concerned. Although he initially thought Amy might have just decided to walk home, when Susan confirmed she hadn't seen her, the situation escalated. Marshall drove home, keeping an eye out for any sign of Amy. When he pulled into their driveway, anxiety took over. Amy was still missing. He quickly reached out to the police for help, and Officer Jeff Garland responded. Garland was already familiar with the Pagnac family due to past calls, many of which had involved domestic assaults and Amy running away. This history made some people view Amy as a troubled teen dealing with significant emotional challenges. However, her mother, Susan, fiercely defended her daughter, insisting that despite Amy's past incidents of running away, she was a generally happy child excited about starting school. Susan also pointed out that Amy's medical condition, which required her to take medications for seizures, made the runaway theory unlikely. In the days following Amy's disappearance, investigators scoured the scene and searched the nearby areas, including parks and the family home. However, it was frustrating to learn that they failed to check the gas station for security footage, which could have provided crucial information. Over the years, Amy's case was largely overshadowed by other high-profile missing person cases in Minnesota, notably the Jacob Wetterling case, which was resolved in 2016. The unfairness of this lack of attention weighed heavily on those who had followed Amy's case. To add to the sadness, Jacob Wetterling had gone missing just 2 months after Amy, which created an eerie parallel in the cases of missing children. Susan, still hoping for answers, stated, "I have no idea where Amy is. I have only my fears." In 2014, 25 years after Amy's disappearance, the investigation took a new turn when the Maple Grove police, along with the FBI in Hennepin County, conducted a search of the Pagnac home. The search lasted a week, and the authorities examined the house thoroughly, even going so far as to search through Amy's personal belongings, including her artwork, schoolwork, and even her baby teeth. This search brought a renewed sense of hope for those following the case, especially when the media picked up on the development. However, despite the increased attention, the investigators remained tight-lipped about what they found. The police refused to comment on the specifics of what they were excavating and emphasized that they were following up on leads, but real progress was limited. The case continued to suffer from a lack of answers, with no arrests made and no significant leads emerging. One particularly strange aspect of the investigation was the involvement of Amy's biological father. Some sources mention a man named Marshall Mitten, while others suggested the search for her biological father was still ongoing. This added another layer of complexity to the already convoluted case. Over the years, several theories about Amy's disappearance have emerged. Initially, law enforcement believed Amy may have run away, as she had done before. However, Susan quickly dismissed this theory, convinced that Amy would never stay gone, especially with her excitement about starting school. Another theory suggested that Amy might have suffered a seizure while waiting for her father at the gas station, causing her to wander off. However, no one had seen her leave the car, which cast doubt on this possibility. Eventually, law enforcement reclassified the case as a potential abduction, and theories about outside involvement, including kidnapping or even sex trafficking, began to surface. One of the most bizarre developments in the case came when private investigators hired by Susan claimed to have seen Amy in a strip club in the early 1990s. However, before they could act on this information, Amy allegedly moved away, further complicating the investigation. Additionally, during a transition to a new police building, key records about Amy's case went missing, including crucial witness statements and timelines. In a Reddit post, Susan addressed some concerns that people had raised, particularly the claim that Amy had exhibited violent behavior. She strongly denied this, stating that Amy never had any violent tendencies. Interestingly, a witness later came forward, claiming to have seen Amy leave the farm with her father, and private investigators were able to track this person down and share the information with authorities. However, despite the discovery, the case still lacked clear answers. Over the years, local law enforcement interviewed both of Amy's parents multiple times, but no new information surfaced. Amy's parents are listed as her guardians on her birth certificate, and while there have been theories about what may have happened, the case remains unsolved. Despite this, the investigation continues behind the scenes, with authorities working hard to protect the integrity of the case and follow up on every lead. Reddit users have speculated about various aspects of the case, including the odd behavior of Amy's parents, particularly the stepfather, Marshall. One Reddit user shared that they had been friends with Amy's sister and felt uneasy about the family's dynamics after Amy disappeared. Another user suggested that there were strange vibes surrounding Marshall, and this sense of suspicion led to further questioning about the family's involvement. As time goes on, the mystery of Amy Pagnac's disappearance remains unsolved. The case is filled with twists and turns, with unanswered questions and a lack of clear progress. Despite the many theories that have emerged, the one thing that remains certain is the pain and uncertainty that Susan and the rest of Amy's family have lived with for over 3 decades. Amy would be 48 years old today, and her family continues to hold on to hope, urging anyone who may have even the smallest piece of information to come forward. Sometimes, it's the smallest detail that can be the key to finally bringing Amy home. If you have any information about Amy Pagnac's disappearance, please reach out to the Maple Grove Police Department at 763-494-6120. The disappearance of Wendy Khan is a case that haunts those who knew her, a story filled with neglect, a lack of investigative urgency, and a man with a dark past who vanished without a trace. Wendy Khan, 46 years old at the time of her disappearance, was a mother, a friend, and a woman looking for a way out of a difficult relationship. Living in Mankato, Minnesota, Wendy had been in a tumultuous relationship with her boyfriend, Muhammad Bilal Chung Tai, a man who had a documented history of domestic violence, stalking, and restraining order violations. Her daughter, Anissa, never got along with him, and their interactions were often hostile. Wendy, it seemed, was reaching a breaking point in her relationship. On May 31st, 2018, Wendy and Anissa spent the day together, running errands and enjoying each other's company. That evening, they returned to Wendy's house to sit on the couch and talk. But when Ty came home, his reaction was swift and aggressive. He demanded that Anissa leave immediately, or he would call the police. This wasn't unusual. He had made it clear that he didn't want her around. Wendy had confided in her daughter that she was considering moving out, possibly finding a townhouse for the two of them to live in together. But that plan never had the chance to become reality. Later that night, Wendy drove Anissa home. The next day, June 1st, 2018, Wendy and Anissa spoke on the phone. Wendy sounded normal. There was nothing in her voice or words that suggested anything was wrong. But the following day, June 2nd, when Anissa tried to call her mother, Wendy's phone went straight to voicemail. It was unusual for her mother not to answer. Anissa called again, over and over. Nothing. After 2 days of silence, Anissa and her father, Wendy's ex-husband, went to the Mankato Police Department and filed a missing person report. Wendy was gone, and no one knew where she was. When police questioned Ty, his answer was as dismissive as it was predictable. He claimed Wendy had left him for another man. He didn't seem concerned. He didn't ask questions. He simply stated that she was gone and implied that she had moved on. But Wendy's car was missing. The only items unaccounted for were her purse and cell phone. Everything else remained in the home. Then, 6 days after she went missing, Wendy's car was found abandoned behind a CVS pharmacy. This wasn't just any CVS. It was the one Wendy regularly visited to pick up her prescriptions. Even more disturbing, one of the car's tires had been slashed. This was the last tangible clue in Wendy's case. Despite the alarming circumstances, police didn't consider Ty a suspect. They never conducted a forensic search of the home he shared with Wendy. There were no in-depth interrogations, no warrants issued for his property or vehicles. Officers simply took his word that Wendy had left willingly. It was a tragic example of law enforcement deciding not to investigate a case before they even started. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, Ty sold the house and disappeared. Shortly after Wendy vanished, Ty put the house on the market. Once it sold, he left town. He abandoned his car and his cell phone, items that would typically be essential to someone planning to start a new life. He also had money coming to him from the sale of the house, but he never collected it. It was as if he had simply evaporated into thin air. People speculated. Did he flee the country? Did he assume a new identity? Or, as some theorized, did he take his own life? Ty's past was littered with red flags. He had been convicted of domestic assault, stalking, and violating a restraining order. At the time of his disappearance, he had 2 active warrants for his arrest related to a stalking case involving his ex-wife. He was a dangerous man with a history of controlling and abusive behavior. Anissa recalled instances where Wendy had confided in her about Ty's abuse. Though no official charges had ever been filed against him regarding Wendy, it was clear she was in an unhealthy and potentially life-threatening situation. Many believed Ty figured out Wendy was planning to leave him, and in his paranoid, possessive state, he decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could. There are several theories about Wendy's fate. Ty killed her in the heat of an argument. Some speculate that after Wendy dropped Anissa off, she went home and finally told Ty she was leaving him. Ty, already on edge, snapped. He disposed of her body in a river. A strong theory suggests that Ty killed Wendy and then transported her body to a nearby fast-moving body of water. When bodies are dumped in rivers, they often don't resurface, especially if they get caught on underwater debris. This could explain why Wendy has never been found. Ty committed suicide. As the pressure of Wendy's disappearance mounted and people started asking questions, Ty may have grown increasingly paranoid. Those who believe he took his own life speculate that he disposed of Wendy first, then ended his own life in a similar manner. The fact that his body has also never been found supports this chilling possibility. Wendy's daughter, Anissa, has been left without answers, struggling with the pain of losing her mother and never knowing what really happened to her. Wendy's bank account hasn't been accessed since May 30th, 2018. Her phone was last used on June 1st before going silent forever. There has been no indication that she simply ran away. Every year, on the anniversary of Wendy's disappearance, the Mankato Police Department issues a short statement claiming the case remains open. But to Wendy's loved ones, the effort put into the investigation has been lackluster at best. The police did not search the home. They let a key person of interest disappear without a trace, and they have no new leads. It's a devastating reminder that some missing persons cases simply don't receive the attention they deserve. As time passes, the chances of finding Wendy Khan grow slimmer. Unless someone comes forward with new information, her case may remain unsolved forever. If Wendy was murdered, as so many believe, the man responsible is either dead or living freely, never held accountable for what he did. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Wendy Khan, please contact the Mankato Police Department. Her daughter still waits for answers. Someone out there knows the truth. It's time for Wendy to come home. April Pease was last seen in Bloomington, Minnesota, on March 17, 2009. She has never been heard from again. She had recently moved to a women's shelter in Minnesota to get treatment for her addiction and to get away from her former boyfriend, Cedric Joseph Marks. Her mother said she had gotten clean and seemed to be doing well. She was not reported missing for several months. Pease was in a bitter custody dispute with Marks at the time of her disappearance. When she failed to show up for court about the custody issue on March 20th, 3 days after her disappearance, Marks speculated she had relapsed. He was awarded custody of their 4-year-old son and wasn't considered a suspect in Pease's disappearance at the time. In January 2019, another of Marks's former girlfriends, Jenna Scott, disappeared with her friend Michael Swearingen from Temple, Texas. Scott had gotten a protective order against Marks, saying he had threatened her and her family and had choked her and thrown her out of his car. The order was not made permanent, however. In August 2018, Marks had been charged with burglary after he allegedly broke into Scott's house. Marks was arrested in Michigan on the outstanding burglary charge. A photo of him is posted with this case summary. His current girlfriend was arrested on the same charge, and his wife, Jinnell McDonough, was arrested for harboring a fugitive she allegedly helped Marks hide from the police. 2 weeks after they vanished, Scott and Swearingen's bodies were found buried in Okfuskee County, Oklahoma. Marks was charged with their murders and extradited to Texas. He was ultimately convicted of their murders and sentenced to death. Authorities began reinvestigating Pease's disappearance in light of the later homicides. One of the people they interviewed was a Belton, Washington woman named Kelly Christine Sorensen, who had been another one of Marks's girlfriends. A photo of her is posted with this case summary. When Sorensen was interviewed in 2019, she admitted she'd helped Marks find Pease in Minnesota after Pease left him in 2009 by calling airlines and shelters across the country and even posing as Pease. She further admitted to playing a role in the abduction of Pease. Sorensen stated she and Marks had traveled to Minnesota and found the women's shelter, where Pease was staying with her and Marks's 4-year-old son. They parked across the street from the shelter and waited for her. When they saw Pease drive up and get out of her car with the boy, Marks punched her and forced her into his vehicle. Sorensen dropped the child off at the shelter. Then she and Marks drove away with Pease. According to Sorensen, Marks drove south on Interstate 35, and at first, Pease screamed and yelled for help, but eventually she fell asleep. At some point, Marks turned onto a gravel road and stopped beside a shack that appeared to be abandoned. This was possibly somewhere in North or South Dakota. Sorensen stated Marks took Pease out of the car, and as she begged for her life, he put her in a chokehold and dragged her out of sight behind the shack. Sorensen waited in the car during this time. When Marks returned, he was alone and crying, saying he'd murdered Pease and removed her hands and teeth to prevent her body from being identified. Another witness police spoke to about Pease's case was Marks's wife, McDonough. She said Marks had admitted to her that he'd killed Pease so he could get custody of their son. He gave her a CD which he had made for his son to watch when he grew up. The CD contained 2 videos in which Marks spoke to his children and said he was about to go and do something that could either get him locked away for the rest of his life or get him killed. Speaking directly to his and Pease's son, Marks said he was going on a road trip to save the boy's life because Pease had kidnapped him. In March 2020, the 11th anniversary of Pease's disappearance, Marks and Sorensen were charged with second-degree murder in her case. The suspects are awaiting trial. Pease's body has not been recovered, but foul play is suspected due to the circumstances involved. Investigators believe it's in the Clearview, Oklahoma, area, a place where Marks has ties. Barbara Pasotti was a resident of Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1969. She was visiting her parents in Hibbing, Minnesota on June 14, 1969, when she was last seen near Sammy's Pizza downtown, just after midnight. Her roommate saw her get into a green 1964 Oldsmobile driven by Jeffrey Dolinek, whom she was dating at the time. The vehicle belonged to Dolinek's father. Pasotti has never been heard from again. When questioned about Pasiotti's case in 1969, Dolinek claimed they had argued in his car, and he left the vehicle as a result. When police searched his car, they found Pasiotti's purse with her identification inside. One of the purse's straps was detached. The officers who questioned Dolinek noticed clothing stained with grass and mud lying on the floor of his apartment. They subsequently searched the residence, but Dolinek's muddy shoes and pants had already been taken away by his mother. Investigators recovered the shoes, but not the pants. Dolinek threatened to commit suicide after Pasiotti's disappearance and was hospitalized for observation. He sent a cryptic, remorseful-sounding letter to her parents shortly after she was last seen. In the letter, he stated he had hit Pasotti, and later he woke up without her in Mora, Minnesota, and he believed she was deceased. The investigation in Pasiotti's disappearance was reopened in 2005, and Dolinek was named as the only suspect in her case. He was re-interviewed by authorities, hired an attorney, and refused to cooperate further in the investigation. Several searches in and around property formerly owned by Dolinek have turned up no evidence in Pasiotti's case, and he never faced charges in her disappearance. He is now deceased. Pasiotti's family does not believe she would have left voluntarily. Authorities believe Pasotti met with foul play and is deceased, but there is as yet insufficient evidence to charge anyone in her disappearance. She was employed as a secretary for an investment firm in 1969. Her father and sister died in 1977 and her mother in 2004, but her brother is still alive. Pasiotti's loved ones held a memorial service for her in 2008. Her case remains unsolved. If you have any information about the disappearance of Barbara Pasotti, please contact the Hibbing Police Department at 218-263-3601. On October 26, 1996, Veronica Safransky attended a Halloween costume party with a friend at Mick's Bar and Grill in Warren, Minnesota. As the night wore on, her friend lost track of her inside the bar, and by approximately 12:30 a.m., she was no longer seen. Witnesses reported that Safransky had been seen with a man named Kevin Skjerven around the same time. Shortly after, the two were seen leaving the bar together, climbing into Skjerven's black 1997 Dodge Power wagon pickup truck, which had Oregon license plates. That was the last time anyone saw Veronica Safransky. She was reported missing later that day, and an extensive search soon followed. A piece of clothing, believed to be a belt from her Halloween costume, was discovered along a rural road about half a mile south of the intersection of Marshall County Roads 8 and 6. Despite this discovery, a search of the surrounding area turned up no further evidence about her fate. Investigators zeroed in on Skjerven, who had a history of sexual assault convictions. Skjerven admitted that he left Mick's Bar and Grill with Safransky, but he insisted that he had no idea what happened to her after that. To this day, Skjerven has never been charged in connection with her disappearance. He was released from prison on unrelated charges in 2002, but the mystery surrounding Veronica Safransky's fate remains unsolved. Authorities believe that the many dense wooded areas in Marshall County may have concealed her remains, but despite numerous efforts, her body has never been found. At the time of her disappearance, Safransky lived in Argyle, Minnesota, and her case still remains open, with no answers to what truly happened that night. Victoria Alinsky was last seen on August 26, 1990, at her residence near the 1800 block of University Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis, Minnesota. At the time, she was living with a girlfriend in the northeast part of the city, just 4 blocks away from her mother's home. Victoria had only moved into the apartment about a month before her disappearance, and she was about to begin her senior year at Minneapolis Edison High School. That fateful day, she was supposed to meet a friend at a Minneapolis park at noon, and also stop by her mother's house. Neither appointment was kept. Witnesses reported seeing Victoria leave her home with a man, whom she had been living with, the father of the family she was staying with at the time. According to accounts, she may have asked him for a ride to the park to meet her friend. This was the last confirmed sighting of Victoria. Her mother has always believed this man was involved in her daughter's disappearance, particularly because of his troubling past. 2 years prior, he had been accused of sexually abusing his daughters, though no charges were ever filed, and he was only ordered to move out of the house. Despite these accusations, authorities have never charged him in connection with Victoria's case. The man admitted that he spoke to Victoria on the day she disappeared, but he denied that she had ever gotten into his truck. Since then, there has been little progress in the investigation. Victoria left behind almost all of her belongings: her cigarettes, jewelry, clothing, and all her money. This fact led investigators to believe she did not leave of her own accord, and foul play is suspected in her disappearance. Victoria's case remains unsolved to this day. Her mother, still alive but in very poor health, continues to hold out hope for closure and answers regarding what happened to her daughter on that August day. Despite years passing, the mystery surrounding Victoria Alinsky's disappearance continues.